had always considered himself unremarkable. At 34, he worked as a data analyst for Earth's colonial administration, spending his days processing shipping manifests and trade agreements between human colonies and alien worlds. His small apartment in Singapore overlooked the busy spaceport, where vessels from dozens of species arrived daily with cargo both legal and questionable. The morning everything changed started like any other. Sat at his cluttered desk, 3 cups of cold coffee surrounding his holographic displays, when an unusual shipping manifest caught his attention. The cargo vessel Stellar Wanderer had listed its contents as agricultural equipment bound for the mining colony on 442B. Nothing seemed wrong at first glance, but had developed an eye for inconsistencies during his 7 years on the job. The weight distribution was all wrong. Agricultural equipment should be heavy and bulky, but this shipment showed a massive volume with surprisingly low mass readings. Pulled up the vessel's previous manifests and found the same pattern repeated across dozens of runs to different human colonies. Each time, the cargo was listed as legitimate goods, but the specifications never quite matched what they claimed to be carrying. His curiosity piqued, began digging deeper. He cross-referenced the shipping company, Galactic Transport Solutions, with a colonial database and discovered something troubling. Every colony that had received shipments from this company reported significant increases in crime rates within weeks of delivery. Drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and organized crime activities all spiked dramatically. Knew he should report his findings to his supervisor, but something held him back. His boss, Director Harrison, had recently purchased an expensive new hover car on a civil servant's salary. The timing seemed coincidental, especially given that Harrison personally approved many of the suspicious shipments was now investigating. Instead of going through official channels, decided to investigate on his own. He accessed the public records of Galactic Transport Solutions and found that the company was owned by a complex web of shell corporations. Most led back to dead ends, but one name kept appearing in the registration documents: Industries. The name sent a chill down spine. Industries was rumored to be connected to the Hegemony, a loose alliance of criminal organizations that operated across multiple star systems. The Hegemony was known for its ruthless efficiency and its ability to corrupt officials at every level of government. If they were using human shipping companies to smuggle contraband into colonial territories, it represented a massive security threat. Spent the next 3 weeks building his case. He worked late into the night, carefully documenting every suspicious shipment and tracing the money flows between the various companies involved. The picture that emerged was staggering in its scope. The Hegemony had infiltrated Earth's shipping network so thoroughly that they were essentially using human colonies as distribution hubs for their criminal empire. The breakthrough came when discovered that the Stellar Wanderer was scheduled to dock at Luna Station for routine maintenance. Unlike the smaller colonial ports, Luna Station had advanced scanning equipment that could detect concealed cargo compartments. If could somehow arrange for a thorough inspection of the vessel, he might finally have the evidence he needed. The problem was that arranging such an inspection required authorization from someone with high-level security clearance. Was just a mid-level analyst with no connections to law enforcement or military personnel. He had always been the type of person who followed rules and avoided confrontation, but the magnitude of what he had uncovered demanded action. Remembered his sister Sarah, who worked as an engineer on Luna Station. She had mentioned during their last conversation that her crew was responsible for conducting safety inspections on visiting vessels. While she didn't have the authority to order a criminal investigation, she might be able to arrange for a more thorough than usual maintenance check. The conversation with Sarah proved more difficult than had anticipated. His sister was skeptical of his theories and worried about the potential consequences of making false accusations against a legitimate shipping company. She reminded him that their family had always valued stability and security over taking risks. "You're talking about taking on what might be the most powerful criminal organization in known space," Sarah said during their encrypted video call. "What if you're wrong? What if this is all just a coincidence?" Had prepared for this question. He showed Sarah the data he had compiled, walking her through the patterns and correlations that painted such a clear picture of criminal activity. He explained how the weight discrepancies, the suspicious timing, and the money flows all pointed to the same conclusion. "Even if I'm only partly right," argued, "we're talking about a threat to every human colony in this sector. These people are using our own shipping networks to flood our worlds with drugs and weapons. They're corrupting our officials and undermining our security. Someone has to do something. Sarah studied the data for several minutes before finally nodding. Okay, I'll see what I can do. But if this goes wrong, if we get caught interfering with legitimate commerce, both our careers are over. The administration doesn't forgive people who cause diplomatic incidents with alien trading partners. 2 days later, Sarah called with news. The Stellar Wanderer had been selected for what appeared to be a routine comprehensive safety inspection. Her team would have access to every part of the vessel, including areas normally off-limits during standard maintenance checks. If there were hidden compartments or contraband aboard, they would find it. Felt a mixture of excitement and terror as he waited for the results. He had crossed a line from passive observer to active investigator, and there was no going back. If his theories were correct, he was about to expose a criminal network that spanned multiple star systems. If he was wrong, he had just destroyed his sister's career and possibly his own. The call came at 3 in the morning. Sarah's voice was tight with a mixture of fear and amazement as she described what her team had found. Hidden behind false bulkheads throughout the Stellar Wanderer were compartments filled with illegal synthetic drugs, advanced weapons systems, and most disturbing of all, evidence of human trafficking operations. "You were right, but it's worse than we thought," Sarah whispered over the encrypted channel. "This isn't just smuggling. They're moving people, some of them just children, from the outer colonies to the core worlds. The manifest we found lists them as biological specimens for medical research." The discovery of human trafficking changed everything. This was no longer about customs violations or drug smuggling. It was about stopping one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. Knew that he could no longer handle this investigation alone. The evidence was too important and too dangerous to trust to normal bureaucratic channels. Spent the rest of the night researching Earth's law enforcement hierarchy, looking for someone he could trust with information this sensitive. The problem was that the hegemony's reach into human government was unknown. Anyone he contacted might be compromised, and a single leak could destroy the investigation and put both him and Sarah in mortal danger. Finally, remembered reading about Commander, head of the Colonial Security Bureau's anti-trafficking unit. Had a reputation for absolute integrity and had successfully prosecuted several high-profile cases involving organized crime. More importantly, her unit operated independently of the colonial administration, reducing the chances that information would reach compromised officials. Getting a message to Commander required creativity. Couldn't use official communication channels, and he couldn't risk meeting in person where they might be observed. Instead, he crafted a carefully worded message that he posted on a public forum dedicated to colonial administration policy discussions. The message appeared to be a routine comment about shipping regulations, but it contained a hidden code that intelligence professionals would recognize. The code was something he'd learned during his mandatory civil defense training years earlier. It was designed to allow ordinary citizens to report security threats without alerting potential surveillance systems. Had never expected to actually use it, but the training proved invaluable as he composed his message to Commander. Within hours of posting his coded message, received a response that appeared to be from another policy enthusiast, but was clearly from someone with law enforcement training. The message contained instructions for a secure meeting location and protocols for ensuring they weren't followed or monitored. The meeting was set for the following evening at a small in the International District, a crowded area where two people talking would attract no attention. Spent the day reviewing his evidence one final time, making sure he could present a clear and compelling case to someone who dealt with criminal conspiracies every day. As evening approached, realized that his quiet life as an unremarkable data analyst was about to end forever. Whether he succeeded or failed in exposing the hegemony's operations, he had already crossed too many lines to return to anonymity. The ordinary citizen who had stumbled across suspicious shipping manifests was about to become something much more dangerous to the galaxy's most powerful criminal organization. Commander arrived at the 15 minutes early, as was her habit when meeting unknown contacts. She had been hunting criminals across the galaxy for 12 years, and her survival depended on never walking into a situation unprepared. The coded message she had received was either from a legitimate with critical information or from someone setting an elaborate trap. Arrived precisely on time, carrying a worn briefcase and looking like exactly what he was, a nervous office worker who had stumbled into something far beyond his experience. Recognized the type immediately. These reluctant heroes often provided the best intelligence because they had no agenda beyond doing the right thing. "You're the person who posted about shipping irregularities," said quietly as sat down across from her. Nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he opened his briefcase. "I think I've discovered something that threatens every human colony in this sector. I don't know who else to trust with this information." For the next 2 hours, presented his evidence with the thoroughness of the experienced analyst he was. Found herself impressed not just by the quality of his investigation, but by his attention to detail and his logical approach to building his case. This wasn't some conspiracy theorist spinning wild tales. This was a professional who had uncovered a genuine threat. The evidence presented painted a picture that makes blood run cold. She had been tracking individual pieces of hegemony activity for years, but she had never seen proof of their operations on this scale. The shipping network had discovered represented the largest criminal conspiracy in human space, with tentacles reaching into dozens of colonial governments. "Mister," said finally, "what you've uncovered here is extraordinary, but it's also extraordinarily dangerous. The hegemony doesn't hesitate to eliminate threats, and your investigation makes you a significant threat to their operations." Had expected this warning, but hearing it from a law enforcement professional made the danger feel more real. "I understand the risks, Commander, but what choice do I have? If we don't stop them, they'll continue using our colonies as distribution centers for their criminal empire. They're trafficking human beings as if they were cargo." Studied the young man across from her and saw the determination that had driven him this far. "I believe your evidence is solid, but proving it in court will require more than shipping manifests and financial records. We need to catch them in the act, preferably with their entire command structure in place." "What do you mean?" "The hegemony operates through a strict hierarchy. Taking down their foot soldiers and middle management won't stop them. They'll just recruit new people and continue operating. But if we can identify and capture their leadership, we can cripple their entire organization." Explained that her unit had been building a database of hegemony operations for years, waiting for an opportunity to strike at their leadership. Discovery of their shipping network might provide that opportunity, but it would require careful planning and considerable risk. "The next shipment from the Stellar Wanderer is scheduled for the mining colony on B," said, consulting her portable computer. "Our intelligence suggests that this particular delivery is important enough that hegemony leadership might personally oversee it. If we can intercept that shipment and follow it to its final destination, we might be able to identify and capture the people running this operation." The plan outlined was ambitious and dangerous. Her unit would work with colonial security forces to track the shipment from B to its ultimate destination. Meanwhile, would continue his normal duties, using his access to shipping databases to provide real-time intelligence about hegemony movements. Felt a mixture of excitement and terror as he agreed to participate in the operation. He had always been the type of person who avoided conflict, but the magnitude of the crimes he had uncovered demanded action. "What if they discover that I'm the one who exposed them?" "We'll do everything possible to protect your identity," assured him. "But I won't lie to you about the risks. The hegemony has resources we're still discovering, and they've proven willing to eliminate anyone they perceive as a threat." Over the following weeks, continued his regular work while secretly providing intelligence to his team. He learned to recognize the subtle signs that indicated when a shipment was particularly important to the hegemony. Increased security, unusual routing, and payments from shell companies all suggested that valuable cargo was being moved. The break they had been waiting for came when noticed unusual activity surrounding a shipment bound for the industrial complex on Tau E. The manifest listed the cargo as manufacturing equipment, but the security arrangements suggested something far more valuable. Most telling was the fact that the payment had come directly from industries rather than through their usual network of shell companies. "This is it," said during their encrypted communication. "Our sources indicate that the Ruthless, one of the hegemony's top lieutenants, is personally overseeing this delivery. If we can follow him from the drop point, he might lead us to the sector leadership." The Ruthless was legendary even among the hegemony's brutal hierarchy. The reptilian alien had earned his reputation through a combination of strategic brilliance and absolute ruthlessness in eliminating rivals. Intelligence reports suggested he was responsible for coordinating hegemony operations across multiple star systems, making him one of the most valuable targets in known space. The operation to track required coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies across several star systems. Worked with colonial security forces, planetary police, and even some sympathetic military units to establish surveillance networks along every possible route from Tau-E to other hegemony strongholds. Its role in the operation was to monitor shipping databases and provide early warning if the hegemony changed their plans or tried to use alternate routes. As the date of the delivery approached, he found himself working 20-hour days, surviving on stimulants and nervous energy. The tension reached its peak when discovered that Director Harrison had requested access to the same shipping databases was monitoring for the operation. If Harrison was indeed compromised by the hegemony, he might discover that someone was tracking their operations and warn them about the impending law enforcement action. "We have a problem," told during their emergency communication. "My supervisor is asking questions about my database access. I think he might be working for them." This development forced to accelerate their timeline. Instead of waiting to follow to his destination, they would have to intercept the shipment on Tau-E and hope to capture him in the process. It was a riskier approach, but they no longer had the luxury of a prolonged surveillance operation. The raid on Tau-E was scheduled for the same day the shipment was due to arrive. Assembled a team of her best agents along with local security forces to surround the delivery location. Meanwhile, remained on Earth, monitoring communications and providing intelligence support from his apartment. As the operation began, watched through encrypted feeds as security forces surrounded the industrial complex where the delivery was scheduled to take place. The Stellar Wanderer had arrived on schedule, and thermal scans confirmed the presence of multiple individuals in the cargo areas that should have contained only manufacturing equipment. The raid began at dawn with precision strikes on multiple locations simultaneously. Security forces breached the industrial complex while other teams boarded the Stellar Wanderer and secured surrounding areas. Within minutes, they had captured dozens of hegemony operatives and seized massive quantities of illegal drugs, weapons, and evidence of human trafficking operations. But the ruthless was not among those captured. Intelligence gathered during the raid suggested that he had never traveled to Tau-E personally, instead directing the operation remotely from a hidden command center elsewhere in the system. Felt a mixture of triumph and disappointment as he reviewed the results of the raid. They had struck a significant blow against the hegemony's operations and rescued dozens of trafficking victims, but they had missed their primary target. Worse, the failed capture meant that the organization's leadership remained intact and capable of rebuilding their network. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Within days of the raid, several law enforcement officers involved in the operation had been targeted for assassination. 2 were killed in apparent accidents that bore the hallmarks of professional killings, while others received clear threats against their families. Realized that his own safety was now in serious jeopardy. The hegemony would eventually trace the intelligence that made the raid possible back to him, and their reputation for eliminating threats was well established. Offered him protection through the Colonial Security Bureau's Witness Protection Program, but that would mean abandoning his life and identity permanently. "I can't hide forever," told during what might be their final communication. "If the hegemony is allowed to continue operating, they'll rebuild everything we destroyed and probably make it stronger. We need to finish what we started." Admired's courage, but she was also terrified for his safety. "Mister, you've already done more than anyone could reasonably expect. You've exposed their network and helped us rescue dozens of victims. No one would blame you for accepting protection and trying to rebuild your life." But had seen the evidence of what the hegemony was doing to innocent people across the galaxy. He had read the reports of children torn from their families and sold into slavery, of entire colonial populations enslaved by drug addiction, of governments corrupted by criminal money. The ordinary data analyst who had stumbled across suspicious shipping manifests could no longer return to his quiet life knowing that such atrocities continued. The decision to continue fighting the hegemony would transform from a reluctant into an active participant in one of the most dangerous law enforcement operations in human history. As he prepared for the next phase of his unlikely war against galactic organized crime, reflected on how far he had come from his mundane life analyzing shipping manifests. He was no longer the unremarkable civil servant who had simply wanted to do his job and avoid complications. The evidence he had uncovered and the horrors he had witnessed had fundamentally changed him. Whether he survived the coming battles or not, had already proven that ordinary humans were capable of extraordinary things when confronted with evil that demanded action. The assassination attempt came at dawn, just as was reviewing intelligence reports in his apartment. 3 professional killers, members of the hegemony's enforcement arm, had bypassed building security and were moving through the corridors toward his door. Only the early warning system had installed saved his life. Had 30 seconds to escape before the killers reached his apartment. He grabbed the emergency kit had provided and slipped out through the service corridors he had memorized during weeks of preparation. Behind him, he heard the distinctive sound of his door being blown off its hinges. The safe house had arranged was a small apartment in the manufacturing district, far from the government buildings where had worked. As he settled into his new temporary home, realized that his old life was truly over. The hegemony knew who he was, where he worked, and probably everything about his family and friends. "We've identified how they found you," explained during their secure video call. Director Harrison wasn't just taking bribes, he was actively feeding information to the hegemony. When you started accessing the shipping databases for our operation, he reported your activities directly to their intelligence network. The betrayal by his supervisor stung, but was more concerned about the broader implications. If they can compromise people at Harrison's level, how many other government officials are working for them? We might be fighting a war we can't win. Had been thinking about the same problem. You're right that we can't rely on normal law enforcement channels. Too many people have been compromised, and we don't know how far their infiltration extends. But that might actually work in our favor. She explained her new strategy. Instead of working through official channels that the hegemony had infiltrated, they would build an underground network of incorruptible individuals. People who had discovered the truth and chosen to fight despite the personal cost. The hegemony's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness, continued. They believe they can buy or intimidate anyone. They've never faced opposition from people who can't be corrupted or scared into submission. Over the following months, helped identify and recruit a network of dedicated individuals from across human space. Colonial administrators who had refused hegemony bribes, police officers who had lost colleagues to criminal violence, shipping company employees who had witnessed the organization's operations firsthand. Each person brought unique skills and access to information that traditional law enforcement lacked. The underground network operated like a resistance movement, using encrypted communications and carefully planned meetings to share intelligence and coordinate operations. Became the network's primary intelligence analyst, using his skills to track hegemony movements and identify vulnerabilities in their operations. The breakthrough came when discovered that the hegemony was planning a massive expansion of their human trafficking operations. Intelligence gathered from their captured operatives revealed that the Ruthless was organizing a convoy of ships designed to transport thousands of victims from the outer colonies to the core worlds. "This is our chance," told the assembled network leaders during their encrypted conference. "They're consolidating their trafficking operations into a single convoy, which means their leadership will be vulnerable during the transport." The convoy was scheduled to travel through the Vega system, a relatively isolated region of space that would provide the perfect location for an ambush. But intercepting the convoy would require military-grade equipment and coordination that their underground network couldn't provide through normal channels. Proposed a solution that surprised even himself with its audacity. "We need to steal a military ship." The plan he outlined was based on intelligence gathered over months of careful observation. The Colonial Defense Force maintained a small garrison on Vega Prime, including 2 patrol ships that were powerful enough to intercept the hegemony convoy, but small enough to be operated by a handful of skilled individuals. "You're talking about committing treason," one of the network leaders pointed out during their debate. "Stealing military equipment crosses every line between law enforcement and terrorism." had anticipated this objection. The hegemony is using our own shipping networks to traffic human beings. They've corrupted our government officials and assassinated our law enforcement officers. At what point do we acknowledge that the normal rules don't apply anymore? The debate continued for hours, but eventually the network reached consensus. The trafficking convoy represented too important an opportunity to ignore, and traditional law enforcement methods had proven inadequate against the hegemony's resources and influence. The operation to steal the patrol ships required splitting the network into multiple teams. One group would create a distraction that drew security forces away from the spacecraft, while another would disable the ship's tracking systems and communication equipment. Meanwhile, and would lead the team that actually commandeered the vessels. Spent weeks studying the technical specifications of the patrol ships, learning everything from basic piloting procedures to weapons systems operation. He had never expected to become a spacecraft thief, but his analytical mind proved remarkably adaptable to understanding complex technical systems. The theft went more smoothly than anyone had dared hope. The distraction team succeeded in triggering multiple false alarms across Vega Prime's orbital facilities, drawing security forces away from the military hangars. Meanwhile, the technical team disabled the ship's tracking systems so efficiently that flight control didn't realize anything was wrong until the stolen vessels were already in hyperspace. Found himself serving as weapons officer aboard the lead patrol ship as they moved to intercept the hegemony convoy. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. The mild-mannered data analyst who had once avoided confrontation was now preparing to engage in space combat against some of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. The convoy they intercepted consisted of 5 large transport ships escorted by 2 heavily armed cruisers. Thermal scans confirmed the presence of thousands of life signs aboard the transports, far more than would be expected for legitimate cargo or passengers. Felt a mixture of rage and determination as he realized they were looking at the largest human trafficking operation in recorded history. "Unknown vessels, you are interfering with legitimate commercial traffic," came the transmission from the lead hegemony cruiser. "Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Serving as commander of their improvised task force, responded with characteristic directness. "This is commander of the Colonial Security Bureau. You are engaged in the trafficking of human beings in violation of interstellar law. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." The battle that followed lasted only minutes but felt like hours too, as he operated weapons systems he had learned about only in theory. The stolen patrol ships were by the hegemony cruisers, but they had the advantage of surprise and superior training. More importantly, they were fighting to save thousands of innocent lives rather than to protect criminal profits. The first hegemony cruiser was disabled when managed to target their engine systems with precision that surprised even himself. The second cruiser attempted to flee, but was intercepted by ship and forced to surrender after taking severe damage to their weapon systems. With the escorts neutralized, the transport ships found themselves defenseless against the patrol ships' demands for surrender. One by one, they powered down their engines and prepared to be boarded by the rescue teams. What the others found aboard the transport ships was even worse than their intelligence had suggested. Thousands of people from across human space had been crammed into cargo holds with minimal life support, many of them children who had been separated from their families. The evidence of the hegemony's crimes was overwhelming and undeniable. But the most important discovery was found aboard the command ship, where the Ruthless himself had been overseeing the trafficking operation. The reptilian crime lord had been captured along with a complete database of hegemony operations across multiple star systems. The intelligence recovered from ship provided everything needed to dismantle the hegemony's entire network. Bank accounts, safe house locations, lists of corrupted officials, and most importantly, the identities and locations of the organization's senior leadership. For the first time since beginning his investigation, felt confident that they could actually win their war against galactic organized crime. The public revelation of the hegemony's trafficking operations sent shockwaves across human space. The rescue of thousands of victims, combined with the evidence of government corruption, triggered the largest law enforcement operation in colonial history. Within weeks, hegemony cells were being rolled up across dozens of star systems as honest officials used intelligence to identify and arrest corrupted colleagues. Director Harrison and dozens of other government officials were arrested for taking bribes from the hegemony. The shipping companies that had served as fronts for criminal operations were seized, and their assets used to compensate victims of trafficking and drug distribution. Most importantly, the intelligence gathered from the convoy operation led to the capture of the hegemony's remaining leadership, effectively destroying the organization's ability to operate. Found himself testifying before colonial legislative committees and appearing at diplomatic conferences as governments across human space worked to prevent similar infiltrations in the future. The quiet data analyst who had stumbled across suspicious shipping manifests had become the public face of humanity's fight against organized crime. But the most satisfying moment came when he was able to personally meet some of the people his investigation had saved. Families reunited with children who had been kidnapped by traffickers, colonial communities freed from the grip of drug distribution networks, and government officials who could finally do their jobs without fear of criminal retaliation. "You know," Sarah told him during one of their rare private conversations, "when you first showed me those shipping manifests, I thought you were just being paranoid. I never imagined that one person could make such a difference." Reflected on how much his life had changed since that first suspicious manifest had caught his attention. The ordinary citizen who had simply wanted to do his job and avoid complications had ended up bringing down the largest criminal organization in known space. He had proven that individual humans, armed with nothing more than determination and a refusal to accept injustice, could accomplish extraordinary things. The hegemony was gone, but knew that new criminal organizations would eventually emerge to take their place. However, they would face a galaxy where ordinary citizens like him had proven willing and able to fight back against corruption and exploitation. The precedent had been established that humans would not passively accept criminal infiltration of their society. Years later, as work to train new generations of intelligence analysts to recognize signs of criminal infiltration, he often reflected on the lesson his experience had taught him. Evil could only triumph when good people chose to do nothing. But when ordinary citizens decided to act, when they were willing to sacrifice comfort and safety for the sake of justice, they could change the entire galaxy. The day an ordinary citizen brought down an interstellar crime network had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their refusal to accept that individual actions couldn't make a difference. Had started as one unremarkable person with access to shipping databases, but he had ended up demonstrating that every human being possessed the potential to change the course of history.